I want to respond to a question I found on the Small Group Network Facebook group the other day. The question actually had to do with what are some of the biggest issues facing your small group ministry, and the number one issue was how to recruit new workers, and that's the issue I wanted to start a conversation with. And if you'd like to write some comments, I'd like to hear what you have to say as well. I got three things I wanted to say. The first one has to do with the fact that Jesus said this would be the problem. Jesus said the harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. Jesus said the problem is going to be a worker shortage. And so we know it's going to be true, and it's always been true. It's been my privilege to be in some pretty large churches speaking, and I remember, for example, being in First Baptist Orlando. The church was about 3,500 in Sunday school, Bible study attendance at the time, and I remember thinking, man, if you had all these people as potential workers, what could you do with all those potential workers? And I'll never forget my host saying to me, Josh, do you have any idea how much trouble it is to recruit a teacher and an in-reach leader and an outreach leader and a fellowship leader and a missions leader and a prayer leader and children's workers for every group that's needed for a church of 3,500? The problem around here, Josh, is we need more workers. In this huge church, he said, we need more workers. And in addition to writing good questions that have groups talking, I go out in the country and pastor a very small church, 45 minutes from the closest stop sign, or stoplight, excuse me. And you know what the problem is out in that little church? It's just so few of us. We got to have more workers. And so Jesus said this would be true, and turns out it is true. I do think, though, in some cases, we make the problem worse than it is. And what I mean by that is sometimes we have started and try to maintain so many programs that we make the problem even more difficult than it is. And I think some of us need to reread the book Simple Church. And it's one of the things that marks a great church like North Point is the amount of things they just don't do. They just don't do children's choirs, and they don't do sports teams, and they don't do Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night, and all this kind of programming. And I think some churches have taken on so much programming that they make the issue more trouble than it is. And so that might be something you might consider. Just read a book of Church for the Next Generation, I believe. I don't have that title quite right, but read a book recently about a guy that transitioned this small, pretty traditional church into a kind of modern, if you will, North Point-ish kind of church. And one of the things they did was just cut out a bunch of stuff and just simplify the system. And so that might be another thing to consider. But I want to tell you about the story about how I solved this problem when I was what we used to call a minister of education, what someone would call today a small group pastor. And that is, my approach to teaching is a question and answer approach. And one day I was teaching the class, and the class had grown, and we needed to divide and start some new groups, but I couldn't find any workers. And so at any rate, there was a guy sitting next to me that actually had taught in the past. And in a way, he liked teaching. He just didn't like preparation. He was not real bookish, and he didn't love to study and so on. He'd tend to kind of put it off. And one day he saw me teaching using this question and answer approach, and I just written up about 20 questions that I could use in class, and I'd ask question number one and go to question number two and so on. And he came to me afterwards and he said, you know, Josh, let's make a deal. If you will keep writing up those questions, I'll take on what you've been challenging all of us to do, and that is to take on leading a group. And so I did that, and then one thing led to another, and other teachers got involved using those questions. That has actually become a career for me. But the point I want to get at is, once I started providing a question and answer resource, a list of 20 questions to all of my teachers, I never struggled to find adult workers again. And the general overarching principle is this: we want to set a low bar for teachers getting started and a high bar for them to aspire to moving forward. In other words, to put this in the form of a question, do you want a immature Christian leading a Bible study group? And you might think, well, no, I don't want an immature Christian leading a Bible study group. I want mature Christians leading Bible studies group. But I would argue that's exactly where we want an immature person. we want that immature person to start leading the Bible study. It's one of the things that impresses me about part of the genius of the Saddleback system is they not looking for teachers, they're looking for hosts. Someone who has a heart for people, who will open their home, who will serve refreshments, and turn on the television. It's video-based teaching to start out with. And if they want to do something else later, perhaps they could. But the point is, they start start with a pretty low bar. In fact, I would say if a non-Christian came and said, you know what, I'm interested in this thing called the Bible, I'd be interested in starting a Bible study with a few of my friends. I would say, go for it, my friend. We want to start a low bar. As I see it, this is what Jesus did. He simply said to his would-be disciples, follow me, follow me, follow me. Now later, he's going to say to them, if anyone would come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me, and so forth. But the entry point was not there. The entry point was, follow me. And I think we would do well when we try to think about recruiting people to start with a low bar and provide for them some kind of curriculum that, like my curriculum or some others, that is question-based and makes it fairly easy for the average person. I like to say, if you can read 20 questions, you can lead a Bible study group. And kind of set a low bar and then encourage people to spend the rest of their life getting better and better and better at teaching and in leading a group.